So, this is me. Like I said, I'll tweet out the link to this slide deck later. I'll put it up on YouTube as long as the video turns out okay. But this is me. You may or may not know me through a blog. It's currently demosthenes.info. Since no one knows anything about Greek historians, I'm going to change that next year, and it's all going to be it's going to be under the new code and all shiny and new for the new year, but that's in the future. For right now, that's me. Awesome part of that. So the things that I do are, well, things I've been noticing of late are responsive image maps, adaptive logos and diagrams, decorated visitor links, detailed tile backgrounds, cross-browser grid path, animated icons with accurate hits. I may not get through all of these. If I'm moving too fast, or if you have any questions, by all means, please just let me know. If I do get through all of them and you have questions at the end, also really, really good. Okay, so. Image maps. Anyone here old enough to remember the original image maps? Yeah, okay. So for those of you who weren't around, image maps were originally the, let's have a great big graphic on screen, let's draw some basic shapes around those graphics that are basically invisible, and let's link them to other pages. So they were the original way of doing graphical user interfaces for web pages. There were a bunch of, they were very neat. You could do a lot of neat things with them, but there were a bunch of problems with them. So one of which was they basically needed to be made from scratch every time. So you had they were great for kids' sites, right? If you're doing a kids' site, you could be a big happy sun, and you could put a great big circle link around that. You could have a little truck, and you could put a truck-shaped polygon around that, and you could basically link them off to other things. But you basically need to do them every single time. For every new interface you need to do. The big one of the last 3-4 years was that people started to realize they're not responsive. So essentially you'd have a picture, you could make the image easily responsive, we all know how to do that, but you, the registration points would basically get out of line. The moment the picture changed in size, the registration points would drift, so they wouldn't make any sense between I'm clicking here and the image is over here. So SVG can fix all that. So essentially, you make an SVG, you make a path, anything, a path or a polygon or anything else, and you link it. Right? That's real easy. Then you can link up the path. You can put a transition on it if you want to, so you can throw some CSS on it. You can put a fill on it. The one thing I would say is that it's really important to remember is that you do need a fill on these things. So whatever you're doing, you always need a fill, or you always need pointer events all, because otherwise it won't register as a link. So you've got to do that. And then you can do a path hover. You can see British Columbia, Alberta, where I'm from. So it's real simple, right? You just make a shape, transition it, and move it back and forth, and it's all good, which is really neat. You can put the SVG. Now the one thing about this is, of course, that the SVG has to be inline on the page, right? So you can't do this as an image. It's got to be SVG on the inline page. But the CSS, you put CSS at the head of the page, you put CSS inside the SVG, it all works equally well, which is pretty cool. So that's the basic image map, right? The nice part about this is basically you've got maps of every possibility in the world. So if you're dealing with a geographical area, there's an SVG map in whatever projection you already need. If you need a map of the world, it's already out there. Question?
So the reason each one of those provinces, I guess, are hoverable is because each one of them has their own path, right?
Well, each one of them has their own path, and each one has a link around it, right? So as long as you've got a link around them, they're basically active. So the other nice part about this is that the path that you make in SVG becomes the hotspot. So it's both the image and the link at the same time. Does that make sense? So you're killing two birds with one stone, which is really nice. So you don't have to draw this and then try to sketch over it. It's just all done in one, which is awesome. And like I say, if it's a geographical area, which it often is, it already exists. You go to Wikipedia, you look it up, all the maps are available in SVG. I'm also an editor for Smashing Magazine. There's an article hopefully coming out later this month with a guy who goes out to geographical information services, free geographical information services, and shows you how to break down images of SVG from basically any location on Earth. And it's just a couple of little back-end processes to basically turn that into any SVG of any projection of any kind. So you can get this maps just done. Right? you can then take that same idea of here's a shape, right? But then put the shape inside of the clip path. If you put the shape inside of the clip path, and then you gain a bitmap image that references that clip path, but it's all still linked, right? So it's all still inside the link. And you can do the same thing with, okay, now I'm just targeting the image. So note, the one thing that gets a little confusing here, if you've done a lot of CSS, is all of a sudden you have to type out the word image and not IMG, because we're used to doing IMG in CSS. No, in SVG it's image. But yeah, the same thing works in the same way. Because I've got that hover as well, you've got that hover effect on the inside there, which is pretty cool, right? So again, as long as it's filled, right? So as long as that path is filled, so it's got to be an opacity on it, or it's got to have a fill on it, it's got to have pointer events all on it to register. But as long as that's the case, yeah, you can basically put anything you like in there. So that's pretty cool. And then the most recent one that I've been playing around with is you can place an image behind the SVG. Now this is most similar to the traditional image map. So the traditional image map was you had a bitmap and then you tried to draw vector shapes on top of it inside this old image map format. In this version, you have a div that contains the image as a real image or as a background image, it doesn't really matter. And then the SVG is basically drawing the shapes on top. Now the part about this is you've got circle, right? And the text next to it, and the polygon, the text immediately after it. So the idea here is that I'm mapping shapes on top of this image, which I'll show you in a second. It's a bicycle. And then immediately after it, I've got text explanations after each hotspot, so to speak. So the result is, I'll put this in full screen mode so you can see it. You've got the image as an image, right, just the background image. You've got the SVG invisibly on top, so that when I move over those, it just selects the image, so the text next to it, and just says, okay, that's on, right? So it's really straightforward to just bring it up. And I'll show you.
Is that text selectable?
Yes.
If you can get to it, right?
If you can get to it, right. So the one thing is I've got my areas here a little bit broad, right? But yeah, ultimately, because it's just text, right? If it's inline on the page, yeah, ultimately. So, sorry, let me go back to the...
It's screen readable.
Yeah, absolutely. Screen readable, accessible, everything else.